Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Gnarly Data Waves presented to you by Dremio. I'm Alex, your host, and today we're going to be doing episode 48. Wow, has the time has flown by as we've been going through many of these episodes. And today we're going to be talking about understanding the Dremio data lakehouse. But before we get started, we got our obligatory announcements. And one of the most important announcements I can make is to make sure that you go get registered for Subsurface, the Data Lakehouse Conference. Again, this conference is free. It can be in person in New York. You can watch it online. 40 plus sessions on topics like Apache Iceberg, Apache Arrow, data lakehouses, data lakes, all sorts of really great stuff. If you're enjoying the content, you've been watching early data waves, think of that times 30. Head over there to dremio.com/subsurface to register to make sure you catch the Subsurface Conference May 2nd and May 3rd. But today we're going to be talking about understanding the Dremio data lakehouse. And we're going to be doing this, we're going to be having Master Principal Solutions Architect from Dremio, Michael Flower, doing a really in-depth demonstration of some of the most powerful features within Dremio, connecting it to BI dashboard tools, to database visualization tools, and doing a lot of really cool stuff with Dremio. But before we kind of get and have Mike do that demonstration, let's just kind of talk a little bit about what Dremio is. Because again, Dremio is the unified lakehouse platform for self-service analytics. It's going to allow you to connect all your sources. Okay, that's what we're talking about when we talk about unified analytics, the ability to connect all your sources, whether they be data lakes, relational databases, NoSQL databases, data warehouses like Snowflake. Okay, be able to curate all that data into a universal semantic layer and govern it all from a central sort of command center, making it much easier to have all that data sort of organized in one place and not have to do as much data movement, which can be costly and complicated. And also, not only does it allow you to bring your data together, but allows you to federate queries across all that data. So you can join these different data sets together and curate new data sets and make them available to your end users through Dremio's powerful SQL query engine, which is going to give you top-notch price performance and really take advantage of really great acceleration features like reflections, the columnar cloud cache. Again, allow you to federate queries across not just your cloud data sources, but your on-prem data sources too. And when it comes to managing a data lake, you really want your data lake house to feel like a data warehouse in the sense that you don't have to sit there focusing on all these types of maintenance activities and operations. And Dremio offers you lakehouse management services that allows you to automate a lot of these activities. So that way your tables are always in tip-top shape, giving you performant queries, and it just works, along with having a integrated catalog that provides you Git for data features so that we can practice cutting edge data ops capabilities. And again, Dremio can be deployed either through a self-managed enterprise edition, which you can deploy using a K8's Helm chart, or the Dremio Cloud Edition, which you can deploy by signing up with Dremio Cloud and connecting your Azure or AWS cloud account, and you're off to the races. And the great thing about all of this is it creates one place to unify, curate your data, deliver it to whoever you need it, whether it's ODBC and JDBC, as you'll see. Michael will, connect to a database visualizer using our JDBC connection. You can connect through JDBC or Aeroflight in your notebooks to do AI/ML work. You can use a REST API to automate a lot of the operations and that you might do on your Dremio instance. You have a lot of flexibility into how do you control your Dremio platform as long as deliver that data to your data analysts and data scientists. And the benefit of this is that it just simplifies the whole story of reducing your time to insight because you don't have to move the data as much. You just connect your data sources to Dremio. You eliminate a lot of that ETL. Okay, you basically are directly querying or just doing some essentially extract and load and letting Dremio's through its virtual data marts handle the transform piece. And in that case, basic clients can just have direct access to the data that's well governed, using role-based access controls, column-based access controls, row-based access controls, making everything really easy. Also, and in the end, when you put it all together, providing you an intuitive self-service experience through an intelligent query engine, giving you those next generation data ops capabilities, again, allowing you to move more of those data workloads from the data warehouse to the data lakehouse, aka shift left. But with that, I'll kick it over to Mr. Flowers so he can give us a really awesome demonstration of the Dremio Lakehouse and help us kind of really see firsthand what you get when you adopt Dremio.
Hello, my name is Michael Flower. I'm a solution architect at Dremio, and I'd like today to introduce you to Dremio. I'm going to be demonstrating in particular areas such as data discovery, data curation, publication of data sets, and also some elements of security too. We'll also look at how to access Dremio using other tools such as BI tools and data science tools as well. As you can see from my screen here, I'm logged in as a user called mflower. I'm logging into the Dremio user interface. I'm actually logging in as an admin user. And what that means is, as an administrator, I can see all of these things called data spaces and all the data sources as well. They're all available to me as an admin user. I could actually, if I also wanted to, add a new source in here as well. So I could add a Nessie data source, glue catalogs, but also object storage such as S3, Google Cloud, and also databases as well. So we have things like Amazon Redshift, DB2, and as you see down here, Oracle, Snowflake, and so on, all available as well. We're not going to add a new data source today. Instead, what we're going to do is work with existing data sets that are already in those data sources. So let's start off by looking through an S3 bucket. So I've got a data set down here, an object store called S3. And I'm going to look in some folders on this side. So I'm going to look in a folder called CTAS. And in here, I'm going to discover some data sets. So I've got a data set here called Iceberg Cust, which has already been promoted. And it's an iceberg data set. So let's have a look at this data set and start doing some exploration against this data set as well. So all I've done now is click on preview. And what that's going to show me is a sample of this data. And it shows me that there are 18 columns in this data set. It's pulled back for now just a couple of thousand rows in here. And I can also, if I want to, just take away the preview area there. I can look at all of those columns that are available. So I could actually now straight away start running queries if I want to know if I know SQL well enough. I can write my own SQL by just showing this SQL pane here. And you see this the select statement that's been generated by Dremio. They're selecting from s3.ctas iceberg cust. Okay, I'm just going to save that away, so I'll use that later on. Okay, I'm going to hide the SQL pane again. But what I might want to do is, instead of publishing this data set for everyone to use as is right now, you notice over here there are some fairly sensitive data items in here. I've got, for instance, birthday, month and year, maybe as country as well. So let's say that what I want to do firstly, before I allow end users access to this data about my customers, I just want to remove these columns. Now, by me clicking on here and clicking on the item called drop, I'm not physically dropping that column. Okay, all I'm really doing now is that I'm generating a view of that data that just doesn't include, for instance, see birth date, month, and so on. And so by me issuing drop, the data still exists within that S3 bucket, but I'm now creating essentially a view that just doesn't include this birth information in here. So let me click remove birth year as well. And then we'll see that eventually on here, we've got a data set that's got fewer columns in. You notice now we're down to 15 columns. And if I click on birth country now and drop that one as well. Okay. And if I now look at that data set, I've now got a smaller data set. I've got a narrower data set. I've got 14 columns in there. Okay. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to save this view and I'm going to allow my end users to access this data set. So if I just click on Save as View, and I'm going to publish this into one of those areas called a space. And I've got a data space here called Common, and I'm going to call this view Customer. So let me save this as a data set in my common area there called Customer. And if I save that now, what that will mean is then any end users who've got access to this common space, they'll be able to see that data as well. And before we do that, though, let's add a few more bits of information here. Let's just start look at the details of the data set I've just curated here. We'll see the data again if you want to. You can click on preview and see that data. If you notice now, I've got 14 columns. And we don't see that birth information in here anymore. If you look at the SQL pane, you'll see now that actually I'm getting that data without those columns in as well. And if I look at the details now, you'll see that actually I've got information about the columns that are in my view, my virtual data set. And I could add in here, for instance, a label. So I might decide to add a label. Let's add a label here called Dremio Demo. Okay. And that means that this data set could be searchable on that label as well, and we'll come back to that later on. What I can also look at here from the admin perspective is a lineage. I've got a data set which is effectively a view on my S3 storage layer. Lineage will show me from the perspective of the virtual data set that I'm just working with now called customer. It'll show me that that data set is actually based on an S3 bucket over here as well. So it shows me, and Dremio will maintain that lineage as well. Okay, so as an admin user, we can see the lineage of the data set all the way back to the source. Okay, now I'm just going to open up another tab for a moment here. We're going to look at this area here called the common folder. And if I just look at this common data set, here's that data set I've just created called customer. Let's have a look at the properties of the folder itself. And if I look at the settings in here, we'll see that basically this is a common folder, which means that, and notice there that all users have got access to select data sets from this folder. And what that means is basically this folder is kind of public. And it means that if another end user is to connect to Dremio, they would see any of the data sets that are published into that folder as well. And I'm going to prove that now by logging in as a different user. Okay, I've got an end user 2 here. I'm also going to log in. Let me just log in as let's take end user 2 for now. And if I log in this one now, you'll see that basically if I look at that for that end user information, now we'll see that I could then see that data set immediately in here as well. Okay, what I'm firstly going to do though is I'm going to try something else for now. I'm actually going to try and run a select statement, which is actually against my original S3 bucket. So if I notice if I run from my S3 source, you notice my end user doesn't have access to that data set. It doesn't have access to the S3 bucket. So my end user 02 can't see that data. And what they can do instead here is they could, for instance, decide to select from this data set instead. So if they know how to write SQL, they can do it in that way and see the data. Okay. Another method of that end user being able to see the data, by the way, is if we went back to the home screen, they can actually search for the data set based on that tag that I put in earlier. Either they could search on the name, but if I type in, for instance, Dremio demo here, we'll see that actually they also can see that data set through the tag, the label I've added in as well. And so they'll be able to see that same data set. They don't have to type the SQL command in there either. And we'll see that same data set through there as well. Okay, so this data set is available because it's being published into that common space. Okay, and public access has been granted to that space. And so, for instance, then my end user, they could, for instance, decide to decide that this is a good starting point for their own data sets to be run from. Okay, so if they went from here and looked at this common data set again and looked at the common customer, they can hover over and Dremio will actually show them some metadata about that information. It'll show me how many jobs are being run. I've been now run 3 queries against this customer data set already. And also now I could look at other things like a details panel and the lineage. But I could even launch, for instance, Power BI from here. So I can launch, as my end user too, I can launch Power BI to start looking at that data straight away. What Dremio's now done is it's launched Power BI desktop using a direct query against that data set in the context of the user who I'm working with as well. So let me just launch Power BI from here. Here we can see a Power BI template, and I can now expand the form there. And if I look through the fields that are now available, I could build a new report directly against my data set. Notice I've got all those columns that are in my customer data set. So let's say, for instance, let's take salutation. Okay, I'll put that on my x-axis. And let's say I want to know how many people have got common salutations. Okay, let's put the customer ID into a count of customer ID. So basically what we're now seeing is a count of all the different salutations for all my customers. Okay, and you can see there I've got 600 lords. I seem to have got rather a lot of lords in this customer database. But essentially what's been happening there is I'm launched Power BI in direct query mode directly against my data set in Dremio. And Dremio is then going back to the S3 bucket and pulling back this data in a very performant way. Now what I want to do is I want to remove I want to basically enhance this data set in another way now. I've got another set of users who want to take this existing customer data set. And what they really want to do now is they want to look at it from, do some analysis on this data set, basically by looking at the address information for each customer. And they want to start asking queries about where the customers are actually based. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to run a join condition to take my customer data set that I've already got set up. And I'm going to run a join across. And I'm going to join it to another data set which contains the customer address information. Now I could write this using SQL, but I'll show you for now how to use it using the Dremio UI instead. So I'm going to build a join operation. It'll be by clicking on the join button beneath, and I'm going to search for some address data. I know I've got some somewhere in one of my data sources. So if I look for instance, for address here, Dremio will find me all the data sets which I've got access to, which contain customer address information. And you notice here I've got some which are actually down in my SQL Server database. So I've got a customer address data set here, and I'm going to use that one as my basis for my join. Okay, and I'm going to join on from my customer data set using customer SK. Sorry, not customer SK, address SK. I mean. And I'm going to join that to the customer address key as well and apply that change. And what that will then give me is a wider data set, whereas before I only had 14 columns. We'll see now I've got 27 columns in here. Okay. And if I scroll across now, you see that actually this is a much wider data set and includes information about not only the customer, but their address information as well, such as the street number and so on. Now, maybe I don't want to publish this for everybody to be able to access. So I'm going to publish this data set in a different space. I'm going to publish this only for my data scientists to use. So I'm going to save this new view in here. So I'm going to save it in a data science space. And we're going to see at first that end users can't see this information immediately. So let's send the data science space, call this address info. Okay, and save that away. So I've now got a data set called address info, which is a combination of my customer information and information about their addresses as well. Okay, and if I actually now try to access this data set via another user, I'll see that actually I can't see this data immediately. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to log in as a different user. Now I'm going to log in as end user 01. And if I log in here for now, you see that actually the end user 01 can't see the data science space, so they won't be able to run that query at all. Alternatively, I could also log in. I'm connecting here into the same Dremio environment as end user 01. And if I try to run that select statement against that data set here, you see at the moment, if I try and run this query through, we'll get an error message because the user does not have access to that data set. Okay, so let me give access as the administrator to that data science space to end user 01. Okay, so I'll just go back in as my end user again for a moment. And if I go back to my home screen here, if I click on data science, this is the data science space. And I'm going to now allow end user 1. I do it at user level, I can do it at group level, end user 01. And I'm going to give them privileges to select from any of the data sets that are published into that data science space. Okay. And if I now go in as my end user 01 again and refresh my screen here, you'll see that now they've got access to that data science space. There we are. Okay. And we can see the address info now as well. And similarly, now, if I rerun that exact same query from my JDBC tool, we'll see that I now see that data in here as well. So I'm now running that select statement against that data set. And Dremio is now providing me with that information as well. Okay, so we see the 10 rows that have come through as well. So this shows that Dremio's common role-based access control model applies irrespective of the tool that you're using to access the data. Okay, so what I'm now going to do is I can now see the data, but maybe I want to do something else. Maybe as my data science user, I want to run something a little bit more complex. and I can run queries such as this directly against that. So I can say, give me the state and the count. So basically what I want to find now is which is the state which has got most of our customers in. Okay, so I'm selecting the state name, account from our data science data set. I'm grouping by the first column and ordering by the count in descending order. And that's bear in mind here what we're now doing is that, remember, this query is actually fetching data from data sets in different sources. And so we're seeing here that the state Texas has got 92 customers. Okay, so Texas is our most popular state with our customers. Okay, remember that query is running against data both on S3 and against SQL Server as well. So in this demonstration, we've seen how Dremio can provide secure access to data sets, which can be spread across many sources. We've demonstrated how the data can be used by different personas using different tools. Dremio's semantic layer offers an abstraction layer to end users, and they can be served data without having to do all of that data discovery themselves. In addition, end users can themselves discover data sets and do their own curation on data sets that they've been given access to. In the next session, we'll learn more about Dremio's data lakehouse capabilities, not just reading data, but data manipulation too.
So now that was a great demonstration, Mike. And for everyone, if you guys really enjoyed this, what I really recommend you to do is just get hands-on with Dremio. And you can do that again through either, if you just want to evaluate it on your laptop, you can just spin up a Docker container on your laptop and just see it do its thing. But if you want to deploy it into production, you can use our K8's Helm chart or Dremio Cloud to get it done. And you can find all the information to do that by scanning this QR code or heading over to dremio.com/get-started. That's get-started, dremio.com/get-started, and try it out today. With no further ado, let's head over to some Q&A. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. So we'll be doing some Q&A. So in order to do Q&A, submit your questions in the question and answer area. Okay, so I'll give you guys all a minute to do Q&A and put Q&A in the box. But let me ask Mike a question. So Mike, sort of what are some of your favorite tools when you're trying out like different Dremio integrations? We saw DB Visualizer, we saw Power BI. But is there any other tools that you've seen like people get a lot of value of in their integrations with Dremio?
Yeah, we have a lot of different users personas, and so that's kind of why I try to touch on a few different areas there during that demo, because we wanted to explain that, to all intents and purposes, Dremio looks and feels like a database from a consumption point, right? You can connect via, I use DB Visualizer. Some of my other colleagues prefer things like Squirrel SQL or whatever, but it's just an example of another tool that you can use to access that data. We have folks from the data science side who use things like Jupyter Notebooks, and then they connect in either using ODBC or even Arrow Flight. One of the advantages there is to get that data. If the data sets are quite large, they sometimes want to be able to pull back that data in a method that's, for instance, faster than traditional Turbo ODBC or something. So yeah, it depends which the persona is who's using it. You notice that out of the box, we provide connectors to things like Power BI and Tableau from within Dremio itself, but that's not to preclude any other BI tool of your choice being able to connect in, as long as it's got typically JDBC, ODBC connectivity or Arrow Flight.
And we have a question from Jared. Can you add metadata on data tables within Dremio, like table level descriptions, column level descriptions, etc.?
Well, I think, so in the demo that one of the pieces I did is I didn't actually demonstrate how to add descriptions about the data sets themselves, but that certainly is possible. You can add them using that same place where I added the tag. I added a tag so you could search on a data set, but within that same screen, you can also add in it's table level description information only. You can't, obviously you can enter information about the column, but it would be held at the table level or the data set level to be more accurate.
Awesome. And now am I able to take that that wiki feature that allows me to kind of add documentation? Am I able to do that like at other levels, like let's say like a folder level or anything like that?
Not really. No, it's more within the data sets themselves that you can add that stuff in. Just bear in mind as well, by the way, that everything I did during that demo was done using the UI. Yeah, I know that I used other UIs as well. I know I used Power BI and we used DB Visualizer, but essentially the pieces which are very Dremio centric, such as even discovering a data set, curating a data set, joining data sets together, publishing virtual data sets into other spaces. Although I use the UI for that, everything I did there can be done programmatically, even the adding of tags as well. So there's a REST API method of interfacing with Dremio from an admin perspective as well. And also you can actually extract, import and export all of that information from a command line if you wish. So think about that from a bigger picture. If you want to roll out a whole series of data sets into a new space, it's relatively straightforward to do, and you don't have to, although we love the UI, you don't have to use the UI to do all of that stuff.
Awesome. We have another question from Mayor. How to implement a data lakehouse architecture on Google Cloud using Dremio and Apache Iceberg tables? Do you have any reference architecture to show?
Well, the reference architecture is fairly similar. You probably saw that Google Cloud is one of the sources that we support anyway. So you can land your data set still on Google Cloud as you can on S3, as you can on ADLS as well. And even, by the way, the connector I showed earlier when we were looking through, I'm sorry, I'm moving away from your question, but I just want to remember is that although I showed connecting to an S3 bucket, it actually doesn't have to be AWS S3. We also can connect to S3 compatible data stores as well. So if you've got a data store such as MinIO or something which is on-prem, which supports the S3 constructs, then yeah, we can support that too. So yeah, the architecture for connecting to Google Cloud is fairly similar. You know, we handle that as a data lake source, and we can certainly connect to those sources. And by the way, you don't have to therefore have deployed Dremio on Google Cloud. The demo I gave earlier was actually running a Dremio instance on a Docker instance on my laptop, and I still was able to connect to ADLS, S3, SQL Server, and so on.
Yep. And then again, you can deploy into any cloud using Arcay's Helm chart. So if you wanted to deploy into your Google Cloud, you can do that. But I think it seems to be like all our questions. So if anyone else has any questions, I want to leave it up for another few seconds for any questions to be submitted. Going once, going twice. And then meanwhile, I'd just like to say, Mike, thank you so much for being on the show. This was a great presentation, definitely highlighting many of the really cool features of Dremio. So I really appreciate you coming on the show today. So thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
And yeah, we'll see you all at the next Gnarly Dataways. So keep an eye out on our schedule, which you can always see at dremio.com/gnarly-data-waves. You can also subscribe to the Gnarly Dataways podcast on iTunes and Spotify. So that way you never miss an episode. And otherwise, we'll see you next time. Again, make sure to register for Subsurface at dremio.com/subsurface, and we'll see you soon.